Hello, my friends. Dr. M is here with you again to support your journey with personal principles of economics. Personal because every principle that I have taught you during this video presentation is related not just to the macro level of macroeconomics that we cover in this section, but also to your personal life that you will encounter every single day. So what I want to do today is talk about the price level, and we'll zoom on it and clean up some things that we have created in the past video sessions. In particular, price level is such that it impacts our satisfaction. When people see sales, they seem to be enjoying this event. In particular, they sometimes they even very happy when they make a good deal, a good buy, or maybe a good sell. So if you are a buyer, you are fighting for lowest prices possible to pick up at the marketplace, and that's what leads to your satisfaction. And if you are a seller, you are fighting to sell for as high price as possible, and that's what leads to your satisfaction. So depending upon what role you play at the marketplace, and clearly that we all play either buyer or seller depending upon the time when we engage in the marketplace, thus price level is critical. So let's start by reviewing that our price change measurement is essentially going to show inflation in the event when you have a positive change in price level. So when prices have risen since the base year, and you know from the previous presentation how to calculate the inflation rate, we have looked at this in a great excruciating detail. So when prices are greater than 1, not just positively growing, my friends, but growing at the rate that is greater than 1, then we are observing inflation in relationship to the base year. Then we can also state with confidence when prices are less than 1. Again, I want to point your attention that it's not in relationship to 0. In this case, since you are comparing to the base year, you have to look at value 1. Then prices fallen since the base year, then in this case we have a deflation. And you will hear those definitions from time to time as you sail through life, because inflation and deflation play the critical role in our lives, not just for individual lives, but also for institutions, for firms, for the governments. And depending upon which side are you on when it comes to the market participation, that will determine your benefits or the cost. And finally, if the price level does not change compared to the base year, then you are looking at value equal to 1. Let me give you some examples. I will start with price greater than 1. It's called inflation. Sometimes countries are running what is called hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is going to result in much greater number than 1. And that took place after World War II in Germany and across other European countries where they had to run hyperinflation. Today, some countries in South America, Brazil, Argentina, recently have enjoyed, so to speak, hyperinflation. Let me explain in detail what that means. I have traveled around the world in different countries, and I have been exposed with every day of my life to hyperinflation. Basically, the compensation that you receive in the morning devalues over time so fast that by the end of the month, when you are due to receive another compensation, the value of your salary dropped substantially. So in other words, if you are paid $1,000 today, 1 month from now, you can only buy $500 worth of goods and services if hyperinflation runs at 50% during that period. So as you can see, that is going to incentivize individuals, companies to move away from cash transactions. As soon as someone receives cash, they have incentive to do what? Spend it right away. Because the sooner you spend, the more likely you will preserve the purchasing power of your compensation at the time when you received it. So then some companies, of course, cannot afford to do that without cash completely, and they often turn into the barter, or they turn into the exchange, goods for goods, services for services, where cash does not implicitly introduced into the transaction. All of that I have described is raising the cost of doing transactions on a daily basis for individuals, for companies, for governments, because everyone is running this psychological tax to try to figure out how to preserve the value of your cash that you have at hand. So it is taxing. Hyperinflation is very taxing, and high inflation is very taxing on the citizens, and thus it is not desirable at all. So you want to move away from this, and if at all possible. Now let's talk about deflation. Deflation has two sides to the coin. Deflation is also a bad news for the companies and for individuals. And one way to look at it is when companies see that the price for their product goes down, such as under deflation, then they will tend to exhibit more layoffs. They would tend to reduce the production because they cannot recapture as much profit from the marketplace as prices decline. And thus it's not good for the companies, and it's not good for individuals, because it will be translated into higher unemployment. So deflation is also undesirable, and hyperinflation is undesirable. So what is the balance between the two? The balance historically has been found with running moderate inflation, as prices rise at a very modest pace over time. That's where historically people found the balance. Yes, you have devaluation of your cash, but not at a great extent to the point where it is imposing psychological cost on a daily life for market participants. All right, so now we discussed that with examples, and we can look at the Phillips curve. Phillips curve, an interesting proposition that has been developed as a theory and published and circulated in major textbooks. It's designed to explore the relationship between unemployment and inflation, between unemployment and inflation. And what I'm going to do, I will quickly jump to my notepad and show you how it looks on the graph. So what you have is unemployment versus inflation. Or should we say change in the price level, or that is change in unemployment. So the Phillips curve is designed to show the relationship as such where there is a negative relationship. So in this case, maybe we'll just keep inflation at that moment. It would be less confusing to us. At this point, as inflation goes up, unemployment goes down. And this relationship has been very popular for central banks to consider on the macroeconomics level. And I'll give you an example so you can understand that better. So one more time, take a look at this graph. As inflation goes down, unemployment increases. And that's inverse relationship. Now let's go back to our slide. And basically what it means that as prices rise, and I implicitly already answered that Phillips curve in demonstration, as prices rise, companies see this price increase as a good news. And because they see that as a good news, as such as opportunity to collect more cash from the marketplace, they essentially decide to expand. And expansion means lower unemployment, because they will hire more people to support expansion of the output. So this is where inflation and unemployment relationship has been explored by the central banks. So sometimes central banks engage in behavior fooling people, and I using that fooling people with a grain of salt, very cautiously. They can start printing money, and the privilege to print money only resides within central bank. Otherwise, it's illegal. If someone finds out, the federal FBI finds out that you print money at home, you will be in a big trouble. So central banks does not tolerate competition when it comes to printing money. So when they print the money, it doesn't cost them much to do that. Just think about this. You sit at home and you needed to buy a car. Why don't I just go and print more money to buy the car, and I will give this money to the dealership and in exchange for my car. So when the central bank, like Federal Reserve, prints more money, they basically create revenue for the government without incurring any cost. And printing more money means that there is excessive amount of cash that will chase relatively limited goods and services. And based on the market forces, supply and demand that you have seen so many times, when there is excessive amount of cash that was printed by the central bank, then people will desire to hold less of it because there's too much of it chasing relatively fewer goods and services. So that lack of desirability to hold extra cash that was just printed by the central bank will lead to inflation and hyperinflation, since with competition among those who hold cash, they will compete for the limited goods and services, and they will push the price up. So, and that what fooling people by the central bank means. Sometimes when the Federal Reserve starts to printing money, or any central bank in any country prints the money, they don't make an announcement that they just printed so much money. They do it in a very subtle way that most people don't know about it. So, and as they print money, translating into hyperinflation, companies sees that the prices for their product goes up, they expand production, and they are fooled, so to speak, by central bank into expanding production and hiring more people to carry out and support this expansion, because they foolishly believe that people like their product, but instead it was just a hyperinflation and increasing the price across the board. Of course, sooner or later they will catch up on the news, and they will seize the expansion, because they will understand that it's not due to their technology or to their innovation of the product that the prices go up, but it actually go up across the board. The problem with that you can only fool people for so long, and by fooling people you are creating mistrust between the central bank and market participants. The level of mistrust, or the lack of trust between individuals and the central bank, translates into higher risk within the economy, and this higher risk or variation, greater variation of different outcomes, is essentially making central bank policy more difficult to implement with the greater success. Because when central bank announcing that they are doing one policy or they are pursuing a certain policy, people don't trust them anymore, and thus action of central bank is not taken seriously, and that's a drawback. So many central banks try to not engage in the policy that will translate into fooling market participants, such as Phillips curve outcome. All right, so let's move on, and we're going to now cover something that we have done in the previous presentation by measuring inflation rate when we took the prices of all current goods multiplied by the quantities of all current goods and divided by the price of base year, the year to which you compare the price change, multiplied by the quantity of the current goods. And what we did in the past, I'm just unfolding the three good case, but that clearly can be extrapolated to as many goods as you want, and you want something that is going to reflect the value of GDP, domestically produced new goods and services. So you want to, in this case, if you recall from the previous presentations, we looked at tractor, jeans, and pizza, the favorite consumption items for students. You know, eating pizza, wearing jeans, and riding the tractor. Isn't that fun? So anyway, we calculated the inflation rate based on those three good Ks, and now we can do something valuable for us, and what I'm going to do, I will translate this into the growth terms. Now, we discussed that absolute terms, when those are reported, are valuable, but they are valued differently from the growth reporting. People like to understand how much inflation is changing over time, and that's what means growth. Whether price is growing over time in a positive fashion, translating into inflation, if so, at what rate, and if they drop, translating into deflation, if so, at what rate. That has a very powerful implication for us to consider real versus nominal GDP. I'm going to stop this presentation at this point, and I want you to think about what that means in terms of real versus nominal, and we'll come back to this and in the next presentation. Thank you.